Randolph County, North Carolina. It has a few notable claims to fame. It's home of NASCAR legend Richard Petty. It contains Seagrove, the handmade pottery capital of the U.S., and its county seat is Asheboro, home of the North Carolina Zoo. Asheboro is the center of Randolph County, and while the town of Star is the geographical center of North Carolina, Asheboro is considered the heart of the state. At Hard Times and True Crimes, we also find it significant that popular true crime writer Jerry Bledsoe resides here. Speaking of true crime, from 1990 to 1995, index crime reports across the nation declined by 9.6%, and in the southern states, the decline was actually 10.2%. But North Carolina's reported crime rate grew 2.8% during this period, and in 1992, North Carolina had the 16th highest crime rate in the nation. And in this episode, we'll tell you about one of those that impacted Asheboro and the surrounding counties.
I'm Darlene.
And I'm Melody.
This is
Hard Times and True Crimes. So we had a little contest, so to speak, last week on your episode.
Yep.
And we announced that it was kind of a off the cuff, spur of the moment. You mentioned Agatha Christie. We had some shirts and we thought that would make a great little giveaway. We did have people who commented and shared our episode. We want to shout out to them.
So Angie and Buddy Mabe, congratulations to you two.
Yep.
And congratulations to Montre Thompson.
Yes, and then Lynn Rogers and Melissa Jones. All 5 of them will be receiving a T-shirt with Agatha Christie on it and a mug with Flannery O'Connor.
Awesome. I hope y'all enjoy them.
So we wanted to let you know about an opportunity if you are not already an Amazon Prime member. If you have students going into college, we're at the back to school season and that kind of thing, or if you just have young adults between the ages of 18 and 24, Amazon is offering a back to school deal for a free 6-month trial, followed by 50% off of a regular Prime membership.
It's a great deal.
That is a great deal. We will have a link for that in our show notes. And if you go through our link, of course, we will get a small commission from that. And that helps us with the show and our expenses for this.
Yeah.
So, look for that in our show notes. With that said, let's just jump into our episode.
Sounds good. I'm excited about this one.
So last week, you brought us the episode that was local to your hometown.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a crazy story. If you haven't listened, go back and listen to the episode about Peggy Carr. But today, I'm going to tell about a local case that's...
Before you say anything else, let me just say, guys, if you listened on that first day that we released that episode, there were some editing issues. So apparently the editing that I did in the middle of the episode did not take. And so if you heard coughing and lots of just all kind of crazy stuff, that was because of that lack of editing. So we pulled that and edited and put the new one back in. But I just wanted to apologize for that because we usually do a better job. That was my fault, not Melody's.
Okay, so my episode today is going to be about a case that took place here in Asheboro, North Carolina. Randolph County. And at the time, it wasn't very far from where I lived. And it's even closer to where I live now, almost in my backyard. It is a lesser known crime because there haven't been books written about it or a Dateline episode or anything like that. So you've probably not heard of it if you're not from around here. So Darlene, you might know a little bit about it, but I don't think you know any of it.
I don't know.
Okay. But our local listeners will definitely remember it. If you were around in the 90s. In fact, many of the family members still live around here.
Okay.
And so that, I want to be very respectful of how I share this. One of the reasons you and I have talked about this, Darlene, that we do a lot of the historical stories is because those people who were affected by those crimes are long gone.
Right.
So when we do these newer ones, like yours last week and mine this week, it does give us more of a responsibility to make sure that we are, respecting those victims and the victims' families.
Right.
And so I hope I can tell this story well.
And even the perpetrators' families, because they're actually victims too, and they're innocent.
Yes.
And so we don't want to hurt anybody.
Exactly. We do like to see justice done.
Yes.
But we have to recognize that, like you said, those people have families as well.
Right.
So here's the story. On the morning of Monday, June 29th, 1992, Melissa Mickey, an interior designer, did not show up for work at L&M Floor Covering in Asheboro. Her boss, Garland Lawson, found it strange because she wasn't typically late and she hadn't called in. So around 10:30 that morning, her husband Terry called looking for her and she wasn't there. So that was a little odd.
Yeah.
So when they realized he didn't know where she was, a coworker of hers, Annette Owens, drove over to her house to check. She found Melissa's car in the garage, but nobody came to the door, so Melissa didn't seem to be home. So Annette went back and discussed it with her boss, and Mr. Lawson phoned the Randolph County Sheriff's Department and reported it, and he asked for a well check.
You would think her husband would have called.
He was at work,
Okay.
and so I guess when he called looking for her,
I gotcha.
they probably went ahead and called as soon as they found out.
That makes sense.
Her boss, Lawson, he did meet the deputy at the house, and the front door was unlocked. So they entered the home. When they did, Deputy Greer and Mr. Lawson found Melissa in her bedroom, still in her nightgown, on the floor beside the bed. She was in a kneeling position with one arm up on the mattress. And it was obvious that she was no longer alive.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes. So Deputy Greer called for backup, and then he went back outside to wait for assistance. Shortly after that call, Sergeant Jeff Wilhoit, an investigator, arrived and began to secure the scene. And when the lead investigator, Lieutenant Don Andrews, arrived, they entered the home to make their observations and start collecting evidence. Now, I had the opportunity to interview that investigator, Sergeant Wilhoit, about this case. He is no longer with the department.
Okay.
But he's not going to ever forget that case.
I'm sure.
So he was able to share some information with me.
So he was there that day?
Oh, he was the second one on the scene. And he did a lot of the evidence collecting and the investigation into it. And he actually ended up questioning the suspects quite a bit, more than once.
I'm sure that becomes really personal too.
Yes.
When you see a victim like that.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, he actually said to me that every year on June 29th, that passes through his mind. Like he'll never forget it. And that does come to him every year.
Wow.
They discovered that Melissa had been shot 3 times, once in the back, and then 2 times in the back of her head, execution style. What they collected from the bedroom were 2 pieces of carpet near the window that were bloodstained. A bloodstained mattress and box spring were taken. And when those were removed from the bed frame, there were some bullets underneath the bed that had come to rest on some magazines that were under there, some pornographic magazines.
Oh.
Now, those magazines were not addressed to Melissa or Terry, her husband. They had someone else's name on them.
Okay.
And what really happened was one of the bullets that exited her had hit the box spring. Mm-hmm. So when they went to pick that box spring up, that bullet fell out and kind of fell down and under the bed.
Okay.
They also found a credit card laying on top of a roll-top desk that also had a name on it that was not Melissa or her husband's name.
Okay. Are we going to get into whose names were on these things?
I'm not going to give the names, but I will tell you where those come into play.
Gotcha.
What they did not find in the room was a murder weapon, any signs of forced entry, and no obvious motive. It didn't appear to be a burglary. The TV was there, the stereo was there. Back then in the 90s, those were prime objects for a burglar. Mm-hmm. You could take them to the pawn shop, that kind of thing. And then that credit card was still laying there. So it didn't look like a burglary. And Melissa, she didn't really seem to have any obvious enemies, according to those closest to her, when they asked, various friends and family. And as we all know, when a murder occurs in the home, one of the first suspects is going to be the spouse or the boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, that kind of thing. I mean, there's a good reason for that because a large number of those. And so, of course, they have to speak to the husband and question him.
Sure. But he'd been at work.
He had been at work. Okay. And so a lot of times it's just to rule them out.
Right.
What did they know so far about the Mickey family? Well, Melissa Cooper Mickey, age 30, had been married to Terry Mickey, age 34, for 12 years. And I want to say there, I found conflicting. One paper said 10 years, one paper said 12 years.
Okay.
So I'm not positive about that number, but nonetheless, at least a decade. The couple lived in a 3-bedroom home right next door to her parents with their 2 children, ages 10 and 4. The home was located right off of Highway 64 East on Luck Road. Several of Melissa's family members actually lived along that stretch of road. Actually, that road, Luck Road, was named after her mother's family, who were Lucks.
Oh, okay.
So this particular weekend, their kids were at the beach with Melissa's parents. And she and Terry had just celebrated their anniversary that weekend, maybe the day before. They hung out at a local pool and then maybe watched some rented movies together. I couldn't find the name of the pool they went to, but it did make me wonder if it was the pool that I go to, Ten Aqua, because it's literally just, a few miles from there. But I don't know. Couldn't
Very
confirm.
well could have been.
Could have been, yeah. The cards from their anniversary were still on the mantle above the fireplace. One said, it was from Melissa. It said, Terry, I still love you after all these years. Love, Melissa. And then the other card was more of a funny one. And it said, for a little hanky-panky on it. And then it said, happy anniversary. Ha ha. Love, Melissa.
Okay.
Yeah. However, it was soon discovered that Terry, who worked at the Kernersville post office, had at least 2 extramarital affairs. The couple had been separated in 1985 or 86, somewhere thereabout, and had later reconciled. But during that separation, he had actually lived with another woman during that time. And then officers did find out that he was currently seeking a relationship with a coworker at the post office named Cindy Rinaldi. But despite that, Melissa's family, Terry's in-laws, were firmly in his court and stood behind him, believing there was no way he had anything to do with this murder.
But did they know that he was having an affair? Or
well, I'm
sure
affair? They knew he had those previous relationships and about the separation. And so they did know that there had been some problems there in the marriage, yes. But they just said he did love his wife, and they firmly supported him. Okay. And so even to the point that while this investigation was going on in their home, and now that home is a crime scene, Terry and his kids stayed with his in-laws next door. Oh. And in the following days, another suspect actually did come to light.
Okay.
Through a tip that the sheriff's office received, they got a tip that there was a man named Christopher Cook who was temporarily staying at a house on Salisbury Street in Asheboro. Salisbury Street is only about a half a mile from Luck Road.
Okay.
The roommate told officers that he had gotten a call from Chris on that same morning that they found Melissa. But he had gotten a call earlier in the early hours of the morning. He wanted him to come pick him up. He was at a convenience store. And so he did. Other witnesses did confirm they had seen Chris at that store that morning. The roommate told officers when he got home, he noticed that Chris's pants were visibly stained, and he thought it looked like blood. And he asked him about it. And Chris told him he had been at a construction site. He worked part-time, like on, carpentry and stuff. And he said they had run out of supplies, and so he had started running back home, and he had fallen and hurt himself.
Okay.
And once he got home, Cook called his employer that he worked for, and he asked him if he would provide an alibi for him. He said, well, you just say I've been working at the site this morning. And his employer, not knowing about anything else that had happened, he thought it was for something minor, so he said, yeah, he would. I will say later on, when his employer realized that he was being questioned in this case, he definitely took back that alibi and said, no, that's not true.
Right.
He realized this is something much more serious.
Sure.
At home, the roommate also said Chris began washing those stains out of his pants, but some of it didn't come out. I don't know if a lot of men know this, but blood doesn't come out with hot water. Takes cold water.
Right.
We women do know that.
Yes.
For obvious reasons.
Right.
So I don't know what he washed them with, but I do know he used some kind of a bleach agent.
Okay.
So later, that roommate of Chris's gave those pants to authorities.
Wow. Okay.
And they did test them, but because they had been laundered already with a bleaching agent, they wasn't able to provide any further details.
Okay.
Yeah. And there was another snafu in the case because deputies, they really wanted to pin down a time of death.
Right.
And they knew it had been sometime that Monday morning, but they weren't sure what hours. According to the newspapers, there was a miscommunication between the deputies and the medical examiner. The examiner, he couldn't get there right away to examine her body because he was busy with patients.
Right.
And he gave permission to move the body and have it sent to the state medical examiner's office in Chapel Hill. And when they did that, the Randolph County deputies didn't know he was going to do that. They were expecting him to send that body to Randolph Hospital, where the blood would be drawn and the tissue samples taken and all pretty important things that would help determine a time frame. Unfortunately, when her body got to Chapel Hill, they put it in refrigeration, and then that kind of made it to where they couldn't really do all of that.
Gosh, okay.
So that did throw a little snag in their investigation.
Yes.
However, using the eyewitness accounts of when Chris Cook had been seen at that convenience store when he was picked up by his roommate and comparing that to when Melissa was due at work and didn't show up, they did get to where they could narrow it down to a window.
Okay.
Not quite as defined as they would like, but they did get it narrowed down. So with these tips, the detectives brought Christopher Cook in for questioning. And they wanted to find out, who is Christopher Cook.
I'm biting my nails here.
And what, if any, is his connection to Melissa Mickey?
Yeah.
Christopher Cook, age 25, was a former Marine. He had been stationed at Virginia Beach before being discharged in September of 1991. When officers asked him about why he had been out that early in the morning at a job site, he actually told them he had been out for a run. Now, I don't think that's uncommon for a former Marine to go out for a run. I know a lot of people that run in the dark now.
Yeah.
On those same roads. I don't know many people who do it in a pair of pants, though.
Okay. Because he was wearing jeans, right?
Yeah. If you're out for a run, you're going to be wearing your running shorts or whatever.
Yeah.
Officers were kind of theorizing maybe he had run to the house and committed the murder and then been running back. Mm-hmm. They weren't sure, but they were smart. They did a test. They actually had a long-distance runner on the force. They had him run the route from the house on Salisbury Street to the crime scene on Luck Road to see if it was doable in that time frame that they had narrowed it down to. And they just determined that it couldn't have been done.
Okay.
From when he was seen.
I love how investigators think.
Yeah, me too. Especially the good ones.
Yes.
So then they thought, well, maybe he had somebody to help him. Maybe he had a ride over there. Or somebody picked him up. They had to make some assumptions there. And then they got a pretty good idea of who that might have been. If somebody helped him, they figured out that somebody may have been Terry Mickey.
Her husband.
Because as it turns out, Terry Mickey and Christopher Cook were cousins.
Oh my gosh.
Cook's mother, Betty, and Terry's father, Walter, were siblings. And they had been close, but things would soon change in that regard.
Okay.
They're just a little side note about Christopher Cook. So my sister knows him.
Oh.
I don't know that she knows him well, but she knew him a little bit in school.
Yeah.
Actually, he hit her car one time.
Okay.
Yeah, when she was in high school, they had a little bump up in Ramsor, I believe. And he got out and he told her, "Oh, Kim, I cannot get another ticket. My parents will take care of this if you just won't call the police."
Okay.
And she didn't. And so, sometimes that turns out to be a scam and you don't get paid.
Yes.
You should really never go do that.
Right.
But she agreed to it. And she went and got an estimate on her car and took it over to his house, to his parents. And his mom wrote her a check for the damages just like that.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So he was older than you quite a bit.
So he was 4 years older than me.
Okay.
So same age as my sister, really. While the investigation is going on behind the scenes, the family still had to bury their loved one. This is somebody's daughter, wife, sister, and mother. She's the mother of 2 young children.
Gosh, that's terrible.
It is so terrible. So Melissa's funeral took place on Thursday, July the 2nd. It was officiated by the Reverend Tim Hill and Adrian Pugh. And any locals listening to this will know Adrian Pugh is Big A. He was my pastor for years.
Oh,
He's very well known in this county and in Asheboro. Everybody loves Big A.
Oh.
So it kind of made me just feel good to know that he had a part in her funeral.
Yeah.
At the funeral, witnesses saw her husband place like a packet or a package in her casket.
Uh-huh.
It contained some cards, some anniversary cards, and some cards from her children, and a personalized license plate that read, MM Loves, L-U-V-S, T-M, which stood for Melissa Mickey Loves Terry Mickey.
Oh, I just don't like him already.
I'm sorry. Melissa was a member of Harmony Baptist Church in Ramseur.
Okay.
And she's buried there in their cemetery. At that time, the cemetery was new, and so she was actually the first person buried in it. I was just there a few weeks ago at a birthday party for my mom.
Yeah.
Most people in the South, if we have a party, we just get a church fellowship hall.
Yes.
I don't know how they do it up north, but around here, it's just the church fellowship hall.
Right.
And so we had my mom's 80th birthday party there. So I knew she was buried there. And I went out to the cemetery and I walked around and visited her grave.
Oh.
I will put some pictures of that
Yeah.
on the Facebook group. But what made this even more sad to me was her grave is right next to or in front of another grave of another murdered young woman from our community, Vanessa Dixon.
Are you serious?
Yes, and Vanessa was actually murdered a year later. And I will probably cover her story one day, but I'm holding off right now for some personal reasons.
Okay.
So these two young women, both murdered, were the first two people buried at this church cemetery. I mean, I just took a minute to spend there and just take that all in. As detectives continued their jobs, they did find that hairs at the scene matched Chris Cook. So he obviously was there. And they discovered that Terry Mickey had been committing fraud. Remember, I told you he was a postal worker.
Yes.
He delivered mail. He was stealing credit cards that he was supposed to deliver.
Oh, my gosh.
He would use them. And then after he used them for some purchases, would put them back in their envelopes and deliver them on his route to the people.
Are you serious?
And yes, I'm serious. And officers also found in his home like several, you know how you get like trial samples in the mail of like, I don't know, shampoo or deodorant, just like little trial samples of stuff. Many of those that had not been delivered were found in his home, and undelivered mail was found in his car.
Wow. Okay. So he just had no character.
There are definitely some character flaws there.
Okay.
An integrity issue.
Yes.
For sure. And we both know, though, that having an affair or being somebody does not make you a murderer.
No.
But it does speak to your character.
Yeah.
And what you're capable of.
I'm just mad that he was having an affair.
I know.
And now we know that his cousin likely had something to do with his wife's murder.
Yes.
And I just think how narcissistic to put that license plate in there that said that she loved him. I feel like I would, if my husband passed away, I would put something in his casket that said I loved him.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that did that stand out to you or no?
Yeah. And you know what else stood out to me a little bit was those cards on the mantle were from her, but was there any to her?
Oh, that stood out to me too.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's sad.
It is sad. I will say at one point when he was asked about the affair, he said it was not serious and that was the one area in his marriage that was lacking and he was just looking for the sex somewhere else.
Okay. I mean, and that, I hate that, but I know situations where that has been a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's terrible, but.
It is. A few weeks later, on Wednesday, July 22nd, officers described a late break in the case that led them straight to their two suspects, which were Terry Mickey and Christopher Cook. And at midnight that night, while Terry was at his in-laws' home, he got the news that he was being charged with murder and conspiracy to commit murder in the death of his wife. Mickey was jailed without bond, and his 25-year-old cousin Christopher had turned himself in earlier that day.
Okay.
And now he had also been charged with murder and conspiracy to commit murder. The Greensboro News and Record front page headline read, "Postal carrier charged in wife's killing." And then the next day the headline said, "Family stands behind accused postal carrier," with this byline, Family and relatives of Terry Mickey are backing him 100% because they don't believe he had anything to do with his wife's death.
Okay. Well, families never do.
Well, it is hard to believe something like that about somebody that you love.
It is.
None of us want to believe that.
No.
Just a couple of weeks after that, a Randolph County grand jury indicted both men on the charges.
Okay.
That afternoon of August 5th, at a hearing, Chris Cook was placed under $125,000 bond. The next day, he posted bail for that, and he was placed under house arrest, according to the Randolph County District Attorney Garland Yates.
Okay.
Yates also indicated that Cook's cooperation with authorities had led to his release, but he didn't elaborate because he didn't want to bring more publicity to the case. He knew it was going to be hard to get that tried in Randolph County without people knowing about, you know what I'm saying?
Knowing the details.
Right.
Yeah.
So he was just trying to keep that to a minimum. The News and Record had this quote from Garland Yates. "We have not struck a deal necessarily. I can tell you that. We've not struck a deal, quote unquote."
Okay.
Other than that, they were keeping a tight lid on the case, and some of the family members were kind of upset about that, including Melissa's father. They were just baffled by the fact, and he told the paper this, like, Cook has admitted to being there, and he's already out on bail, and Mickey has not admitted to being there, and he's still in, and hasn't been given a bond. So I can understand why they'd be upset about that. Finally, on Monday, August 10th, Terry Mickey had his bond hearing, and it was during that hearing that his extramarital affairs were revealed. They did determine that he had spent time with one woman at hotels just before his wife's death.
Like the same day?
I wouldn't say the day, but like probably in the days preceding.
Oh, gosh. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Was she sexually assaulted?
We will get to that.
Okay.
We are going to get to that.
Okay. Because I just, those pornographic magazines are, I'm thinking of those.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if they were in the cousin's name.
No, they had no one's name on them that was involved in the case.
Oh.
Those would have been mail that he didn't deliver.
Oh, got you.
It was mail that he had not delivered.
He just didn't deliver. I got you.
Yes.
So that makes sense why you didn't want to say their name.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
And somebody else's credit card that
exactly
he did. Okay.
So that was all part of the mail fraud.
Okay.
Which mail fraud is a big deal.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
That'll get you in a lot of trouble. Now, 6 of Mickey's family members testified at that hearing, and that he was a reliable, trustworthy person and someone who was eager to return to trial in order to prove his innocence.
Okay.
Now, as far as the trustworthy, I don't really think his character
has already proven he's not. So.
Yeah. And again, I want to be respectful of his family members.
Sure, but that doesn't mean that he's trustworthy.
I'm giving you facts. And admittedly, they do realize that some of those things do look bad on him and make him look guilty.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, we have to give the facts here.
Yeah.
So Mickey's lawyer requested a $25,000 bond citing his prior clean record. He had no records prior to this.
Okay.
And his family support, which still included his wife's parents.
Okay.
And his close ties to the community. His lawyer went on to say, this man has a name to clear, children he has to justify to, as well as parents and in-laws sitting right here. He must stand trial to them. He is not a guilty man. He's innocent and not a danger in any sense.
Okay.
He pointed out that deputies had found no gunpowder on Mickey's hands. They had not found any blood in or on his car. And they pointed out that Cook's statements were not credible because at this point, his statements are saying that Mickey is involved.
Oh, like they're saying that he's physically present?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Because I was thinking it might be like a murder for hire kind of thing.
Well, so this is what happened. Cook had at one point said that he was not in the house at the time of the murder. And then later he stated he had been there but hadn't committed the crime.
Okay.
And he pointed the finger at Mickey.
Gotcha.
Okay. He had said that Mickey was in the house and had fired 3 shots.
Okay.
But then his story changed. And then his story did actually come down to saying that he had been hired to do it.
Okay.
And I will get into those details with you in a minute.
Okay.
So after that hearing, Mickey's bond was set at $250,000. which was quite a bit more than Chris's.
Yeah.
He would also have to remain at his in-laws' home, wear an ankle monitor, and stay away from his cousin, the co-defendant, Chris Cook.
Okay.
So Mickey's trial began on November 7th, 1994.
Okay.
So about not quite 2 years later. If found guilty, he would be facing the death penalty, or could face the death penalty.
So he went on trial in 94?
Yes.
So my husband's father was murdered in Asheboro in 1994.
Wow.
And that court case was also 1994.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to cover that one at some point?
I don't know, because it was such an open and shut thing, but I might ask my husband about that.
Yeah.
And see how he would feel.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You know what? That means there must have been a lot of stuff going on in Randolph County, because like I said, Vanessa's was in 93.
Yeah.
Melissa's, the one we're doing now, was in 92. And then your husband's dad in 94.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wow. The sheriff's department really had their hands full with cases.
Yeah.
So Mickey's defense, they worked to have some of the evidence suppressed, stating that a search warrant hadn't been used to gather some of it. Remember those bullets under the bed?
Yes.
Okay. Without a search warrant, you can only gather evidence at a scene that's in plain sight.
Okay.
And those bullets wouldn't have been in plain sight. They were under the bed. But Assistant DA Andy Gregson, he pointed out that all the evidence that they got was in plain view of officers on the scene, because they had to pick up the bed mattress and the box springs.
Yeah.
They were evidence. And when they did, and that bullet was found under it, it was in plain sight.
Absolutely.
They did try to have that evidence suppressed. It didn't work.
Good.
At his trial, both sides agreed that Mickey was not the trigger man. At this point, Chris has admitted to being the trigger man.
Okay. So he's saying he was hired.
Yes. Okay. The disagreement came between prosecutors who said that Mickey conspired with his cousin and hired him as the hitman to do the job for an offer of $10,000.
Okay.
And then Mickey's attorneys say that Cook acted alone and that Mickey had nothing to do with this. Chris did have some drug problems at that time.
Okay.
And had some money problems. So they're saying he was breaking in for money and acted alone. And when he got caught, he pointed the finger at Mickey so that he does not himself have to face the death penalty.
Okay. Was there any life insurance?
Yes.
Gotcha.
I'll go ahead and tell you this. There was a life insurance on Melissa for $5,000 that a few months prior to this, Terry had upped to $50,000.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So here is what the prosecution laid out for the jury at the trial. And there were prosecution witnesses who testified to these facts. The defendant, Terry Mickey, had approached a man named Joe Ray about 8 months before the murder and had tried to pay him to do it.
Okay.
When Ray refused, Mickey asked if his nephew would do it, and Ray said no. So then he asked Joe Ray to get him a gun, and Ray said that he got him a .38 snub-nose revolver. And the murder weapon was a .38 snub-nose revolver.
Okay.
Up until April of 94, officers did not have the murder weapon. I'm not sure of the timeline, but the papers didn't report. I didn't see it in the papers anywhere prior to 1994.
Okay.
Okay. But the authorities, they heard about Mickey putting that package in the casket with Melissa.
Yes.
And they were wondering, could that have been the murder weapon in there that he put in there? They were very, very close to exhuming the body to see what that was. I mean, a hair's breadth away from exhuming it. And Chris Cook, when he found that out, and he did not want them to exhume her, he told them where the gun was. He provided them with the weapon.
Why didn't he want her? Why?
Well, I think he felt bad.
Okay.
I think he thought, that would be horrible.
Okay.
And don't put the family through that and don't put them through that.
Okay.
And so he came off with it.
Okay.
Okay. The gun had actually been hidden at the end of Luck Road, just before it reached Highway 64, in a vacant lot under some rocks, along with a ski mask and some gloves.
Okay.
I'm going to talk more about those in just a few minutes. Okay. So just keep that and put a pin in that.
Okay.
The gun wasn't in there anyway. That package was that license plate and the cards. But the officers weren't sure. And so that's how they ended up getting the murder weapon, was they were going to go looking for it. And Chris put a stop to that, which I feel like he probably did feel bad to have done that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess. So I'm guessing he's probably off drugs at this point.
We don't know for sure because he was out on bond.
Because on the other hand, I'm like, how bad can you feel for somebody? You literally...
Well, sometimes, remorse does come after the fact.
That's true. That's true.
And you got to think, he knew her. It was his cousin's wife.
That's true.
Yeah. While Cook was a Marine stationed at Virginia Beach, he said Mickey had called him, asking how they could raise $50,000 because they were both needing money.
Okay.
They considered robbing a drug dealer, but they never carried out that plan, which probably smart. That might not have gone so well for them.
Right. And why did they need $50,000?
Well, at one point in the case, Cook did say that Mickey, he was wanting to leave his wife.
Okay.
And he knew that he wouldn't get custody of the kids and that he couldn't really afford a divorce. I don't know if they were having some money problems.
Okay.
Mickey had apparently at some point seen an attorney, and that attorney told him, you can't leave. You need to get some of your bills paid before you can do this. And so he was looking for a way out of that marriage.
Okay.
I believe.
Okay.
That's what the prosecution kind of laid out. So Cook had broken up with his fiance in like January or February of 92, maybe 5 months before. And he had pawned the engagement ring that he got back. Mickey later redeemed that from the pawn shop for him. So in June of 92, Cook says Mickey offered him $5,000 to kill Melissa. Cook refused.
Okay.
So Mickey repeated the offer on June 14th and offered him $5,000 more to make it a $10,000. And he reminded him of all the cash and gifts he had been helping him out with and giving him, and how he got that engagement ring back out of the pawn shop, and he said, you owe me a favor. Cook continued to refuse the offer, and he tried to avoid Mickey after that. But Mickey went to his house and promised to pay him $5,000 before the killing and $5,000 after he received his $50,000 life insurance payout. Because he had upped that insurance policy on her.
Right.
And he insisted he needed to get this done. Cook finally agreed to the scheme to kill Melissa because he did feel he owed Mickey a favor and he owed him some money, and he needed money.
Oh my gosh.
So, according to the state's case, Mickey and Cook met at Mickey's house on Sunday, the 28th of June, 1992, to plan the murder. Terry and Melissa's children were at the beach with her parents, which I said earlier, and he told him he needed that killing done that night or the next morning.
When I knew when those kids were gone, I knew.
Is that what made you feel like?
It made me feel like the husband was involved.
Mickey met Cook at about 2:45 in the morning and took him back to his home. He gave Cook a ski mask, surgical gloves, and that .38 revolver, loaded with 6 rounds of ammunition. He told him to wait about 30 to 45 minutes before he killed Melissa so he could establish an alibi for himself. Cook said that Mickey told him he was going to drive recklessly to work that morning to draw attention to himself, so he'd get a ticket, and therefore he would have an alibi. And one of Mickey's co-workers testified that she had seen him that morning, and he was driving recklessly on the way to work. She said he came down the incoming ramp, crossed the median, and then proceeded on to the correct ramp, and then flashed his lights at her. And then she testified that later at work, he came up to her and said, well, you don't speak to anybody, do you? And she was like, what? And he's like, that was me behind you this morning.
That's weird.
Yeah, so that was that whole alibi establishing thing. Back to what happened with Cook. He entered the house through a door that Mickey had left unlocked, and he found Melissa asleep in the bed. He shot Melissa in the right jaw.
Gosh.
She writhed her way to the far side of the bed.
Oh.
I know.
So she knew what was happening.
She did, but I think he did have on a ski mask because she probably didn't realize it was him. And I hope she didn't.
I do too.
Cook went around the bed where he fired through a pillow to muffle the sound, and he shot her in the back of the head and through the back. He ran from the house, removed the mask and gloves, and hid the gun where I told you at that vacant lot at the end of Luck Road. And prosecuting attorneys felt that his testimony was credible because it did line up with some other physical evidence and testimony from other witnesses. For instance, the lady from work.
Right, yeah.
The co-worker that Mickey was having an affair with, Cindy Rinaldi, she did testify that Mickey had given her gifts and proposed marriage.
Okay.
He had told her he was planning to divorce Melissa, but an attorney had advised him to wait until his bills were paid. So that was part of her testimony.
Okay.
The trial had to take a break for the Christmas holidays, and so when it resumed in January of 1995, Terry Mickey actually took the stand in his own defense.
Oh.
And he,
okay.
but he did maintain he didn't have anything to do with the murder of his wife.
Of course he did.
He denied that he had purchased that gun from Joe Ray. He said all of his guns had been purchased legally with permits from the sheriff's department. He did admit to seeking that affair with Rinaldi, but he said it was not serious. And then later she took the stand and agreed that it wasn't serious. But then I'm thinking, but she had said he proposed marriage.
Right.
So maybe she meant it just wasn't serious on her part. I'm not sure about that.
I mean, it was obviously serious enough that he was
if she testified
marriage.
Exactly. Mickey's defense lawyer, they painted Christopher Cook as a drug dealer, a master manipulator.
Mm-hmm.
They indicated his financial difficulties and said, he broke into that house to burglarize it.
Okay.
Their plan was to attack his credibility because he's really the key witness to say, I did it, but Mickey hired me.
Yeah.
His testimony is really the hinge of the whole case.
Of course. I mean, what else would they do?
Yeah, so a good
course.
defense is going to do that,
Sure.
and they did. So here are some of the things that they did. They pointed out his alternating stories before he confessed.
Yeah.
His first story was that he had been there, but he didn't do it, and then later he admitted he was the gunman, all of those. And they pointed out that, you're going to be able to plead to a lesser charge and not face the death penalty by throwing him under the bus. Mm-hmm. They had one witness that came to the stand who really just threw a lot of shade in Cook's direction. This guy was John Grubbs. He was a man from Greensboro. He testified he knew Christopher Cook well. Grubbs was a former car salesman, and he had loaned Cook some money after Cook had been forced, he had lost, his car had gotten repossessed from the place where Grubbs worked. So Grubb had helped him out with some money, giving him helped him get a job a couple of times, helped him get a lease on an apartment. And on the stand, Grubbs claimed that in July of 93, Cook had told him that he had done it and Mickey was not involved and wasn't there. So this is Grubbs' testimony. He's saying, Chris is lying. He told me this.
Okay.
Now, Chris is a big dude. He's at that time, 240 pounds.
Okay.
Over 6 feet tall, I think. I don't remember what I read, 6'2", 6'3". He's big. He's a big dude.
Yeah.
And Grubbs said he was intimidated by him because Cook had threatened his life after they had some business dealings that went sour.
Oh.
But he did describe Cook as intimidating and a fabricator of lies.
Okay.
But the assistant DA then questioned Grubb on the stand further. They had several witnesses to rebut his testimony. But the assistant DA, Andy Gregson, he got him on the stand and he grilled him about his own past credibility issues, impersonating police officer, stealing money from employees, which Grubb adamantly denied. No, absolutely not. And then he alleged that Terry's father, Walter, was paying him $30 an hour for his testimony to say what he said. And of course, Grubb's like, no, I didn't do that. But then there were several witnesses waiting to testify against him.
Was there any evidence that was true, that he was being paid?
I couldn't find anything in the papers one way or the other. I don't know where they came up with that.
Okay.
I don't know if somebody told them, but I did look and look. I couldn't find anything.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah, it doesn't mean it's not out there.
Sure.
And who knows? Maybe somebody local will know and will message in and tell us. But so I'm not positive. I'd like to know the answer to that myself. But he did deny it. And then, of course, Walter later took the stand and he also denied it. But, the allegation was made and it did cast doubt on his whole testimony against Chris.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so here is a graphic warning here.
Okay.
So if you're listening and you don't want to hear anything of a sexually graphic nature, you might want to just fast forward a little bit. But you did ask me earlier about the sexual assault. I came across one article in which during the trial, one of the defense attorneys, Locke Clifford, stated that there was DNA evidence that Cook had sodomized Mickey before he killed her, or possibly after.
Oh, my gosh.
But Cook did deny on the stand. He said, no, I did not do that, and I've never had sex with Melissa ever before. And I couldn't find anything else in the paper.
Okay.
If that had been proven to be Cook's, I'm sure there would have been much more about that. And there was nothing else, and that didn't come into play.
But DNA evidence was at that time. I mean, even you had mentioned about the Vanessa Dixon story, and she was murdered, I think, the next year. And it wasn't until a few years after that, I want to say like I can't remember, but it took a few years even for the DNA evidence to, for the technology
To catch up.
so that they could prove that. And so it may just have not been able to have been proved at that time.
Maybe, but then there's the other theory that it wouldn't have been Chris's anyway, that it might have been Terry's. There was no match. There was no match to Chris. I don't know if they matched it. They didn't match it to anybody that way, as far as I know.
Okay.
So I don't want to just throw accusations like that out there.
Sure.
I just want to say the defense attorney threw that out in court. He threw out that accusation.
Okay.
Chris denied it, and nothing ever else was said about it in the paper. So we're going to have to go with the assumption that that was not able to be proven at all.
Okay.
And we don't know that it wasn't Terry's himself.
Sure.
Also, during Terry's defense, several of his co-workers actually testified on his behalf, as well as a minister. And then came the day that his mother took the stand in defense of her son. And her testimony, I mean, it brought tears to other people in that courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
She testified he loved his wife, and he had been devastated by her death. His family stood by him during this trial. I do think by this point, Melissa's family had finally realized or decided they didn't believe his story, and they had probably turned against him at that point. And I think they were helping investigators by that point.
Right.
But I will say Terry Mickey's family, to this day, fully support and believe in his innocence.
Sure.
So here's something that kind of crazy that happened while I was researching the case. I had looked up some people's names that I had seen in newspaper articles and looked them up on Facebook and was going to message and say, hey, would you want to talk about this?
Right.
I was debating on whether I should do that or not. And in the midst of that, I posted on my Facebook page that I was looking for a full-size mattress for my son. One of my friends messaged me back and said, I have a friend who has one. She says you can have it. I'm like, okay, great. Give my number. Called me like 5 minutes later, starts talking to me, and I'm thinking, where do I know that name? Where do I know that name? And then it hits me. It was one of the people I had been thinking about messaging who is who is a family member in this case.
Oh.
So I freaked out a little bit. I'm like,
Yes.
Oh my gosh, what are the chances that somebody's going to call me the very week
That's crazy.
over something totally non-related? Tim and I were going to get the mattress, and I'm like, should I ask? Should I say anything? It seems like this did fall in my lap, but I feel like it would be kind of almost inappropriate. I want to be sensitive. And so I was like praying,
Yeah.
Lord, if I should say something, just give me an opening. And if there's not an opening, I'm just not going to bring that up. And what are the chances there's going to be an opening?
Right.
So we go to pick up the mattress, and I want you to know we're in there getting it. And this person says to me a comment that I can't repeat what it is, but I'm like,
there's an opening.
it was a direct opening. I mean, it was like flat out there on the table.
Wow.
So I'm just like, I would have felt guilty at that point had I not shared it, because here they have told me this. And if I don't disclose, okay, well, I'm actually getting ready to do a podcast about this. I felt like it would be almost deceptive.
Yeah.
I just came right out with it and said, listen, this is going to be crazy, but this is who I am. This is what I'm doing. Would you be willing to talk? They did not feel comfortable sharing with me anything on the record because Terry's still in prison, and he may come up for parole. And they just didn't want to put stuff out there that didn't need to be said.
Right.
And I fully respect that.
Sure.
They did still share some things with me. And I do want to just point out that his family does believe in his innocence. And this is, their son, their brother, their father,
Right.
And so if you feel like somebody's innocent, you see things from a different angle.
Yes.
You can look at this evidence and see it from a totally different angle.
Yes, that's so true. Absolutely.
All that to say that was a wild thing that happened.
Crazy.
But it did inform the way I brought this case today. It probably changed the way I was going to present it. Let me just put it that way. Not that I've changed my mind about what I believe, but it did make me think I need to be very sensitive.
Sure.
And I hope I have. So in the closing arguments, the state prosecutor, Garland Yates, read handwritten notes about the defense's closing arguments. He refuted them and then wadded them up and threw them in the trash.
Wow, that's dramatic.
Literally, I mean, you can imagine how that would impact a jury.
Yes.
Detective Wilhoit did say to me, Garland Yates was a good closer.
Oh, yeah. Sounds like it.
I mean, if I was on that jury and I saw that, I'm like, well.
Yeah.
And of course, the defense, they just continued to come back to Chris's character and pointed out that Terry had so many supporters. But the supporters were saying he grieved so much and he was devastated over this death. And the prosecution said, we've never heard a defense based on grief.
Right. And I don't know, people can pretend. Like, of course you're going to pretend if you're trying to look like you didn't murder your wife or husband. You know what I mean?
Right. You're not going to act and not grieve.
Sure.
Right.
I mean, I don't know.
At first, the jury was deadlocked 6-6.
Oh, wow.
The judge sent them back and said, try again. Like, he didn't let them get away with that. He's like, keep trying, deliberate some more. And after 5 days of deliberation, and that's a long time.
That is a very long time.
Terry Mickey was found guilty on both charges of murder and conspiracy to commit murder.
Okay.
Now, you got to hand it to the jury. They did their job, didn't do anything quickly. They thought through that evidence.
Absolutely.
And the defense came back and said, we felt like there was more than reasonable doubt, but the jury didn't see it that way. So now he would go to his sentencing trial, and he was facing either death penalty or life in prison.
Okay.
On Thursday, February 2nd, Terry Mickey was spared the death penalty when the jury decided on life in prison for the murder charge. The judge added an extra 20 years to the sentence for the conspiracy charge.
Okay.
And that ended the 7-week murder trial, which at that point was the longest murder trial in Randolph County history.
Wow.
Before the sentencing hearing was finished, Mickey found out that Cook was scheduled to undergo a psychiatric evaluation at Dorothea Dix Mental Hospital in Raleigh. Mm-hmm. And his family, they were thinking, he's going to try to use the insanity defense. They weren't real keen on that. But he didn't, because he did actually end up pleading guilty to second-degree murder, which meant he didn't have a trial.
Okay.
Once you plead guilty, he just had to have the sentencing. On April 4th, 1995, Christopher Cook was sentenced to life in prison. A few years after that, in 1998, Mickey did file his appeal. I mean, it goes through several appeals, but he appealed to the Supreme Court, North Carolina Supreme Court. In that appeal, several points were argued, but the two that really stood out to me was that the evidence of Joe Ray's testimony about the gun and some other things. Mm-hmm. The defense attorneys alleged that Ray's testimony to an officer earlier had a conflicting statement in it that was removed and what they called sanitized.
Okay.
To make it match his trial testimony.
Okay.
They said that part that was removed was inconsistent with what he said on the stand, and that would have cast doubt on his credibility. Like, he maybe could have been impeached as a witness.
Okay.
And he was the one that testified about getting the gun for Mickey.
Right.
So they argued that by leaving out that contradicting part, that it denied Mickey's team the impeachment value of that testimony.
Okay.
Here's what that was. Ray had also testified that he had never been inside the victim's home, but in an earlier statement, he had said he had been there once and stood about 3 feet inside the door. In the end, the court ruled that statement's value for impeachment purposes was really negligible, and they overruled it, and he did not get that appeal.
Okay.
So he would not get a new trial. As of now, Terry Mickey is still incarcerated. I believe he came up for parole once, and that didn't happen for him. He might get another chance at parole because he has already been in there for over 22 years. I think it's been, let's see.
Okay.
28 to 29 years.
Okay. Wow.
So, he still has opportunities for parole, but as of now, he's still in prison. Now, Christopher Cook, 1 year ago, Christopher Cook was released from prison the first week of September. He was actually released under this program called the Mutual Agreement Parole Program. Mm-hmm. North Carolina abolished parole in cases that involved murder and rape as of October 1st, 1994.
Okay.
And we're going to call that program MAP. Those are the letters for it, MAPP. The state's release says that MAP is a scholastic and vocational program that's a 3-way agreement between the commission, the Division of Prisons, and the offender. To be a part of that program, an inmate has to show a desire to improve educational and training programs and self-improvement.
Okay.
They have to be in medium or minimum custody, not subject to a detainer or pending court action, infraction-free for 90 days before being recommended. And Cook, who was most recently before his release in Davidson County Correctional Center, he had only had one infraction against him in 1997, which was a citation for a substance possession.
Okay.
Which we knew he had some problems with drugs.
Right.
But he hadn't had anything since 97.
Okay.
So last year on September 1st, 2023, Cook was released.
Okay. Well, so I have a couple of thoughts.
Okay.
That was a lot.
It was.
My gut tells me that the husband was definitely, and I believe that he was definitely that he hired his cousin. I'm really interested in that DNA evidence. I really wish, they had kept that and that could be used because if he raped her, that could look totally different. Maybe not if they're trying to just get it to look like a random.
Yeah, I feel like the defense was a really good defense team.
Yeah.
So I feel like if there was anything they could have done with that DNA, they would have.
They would have. Okay. Yeah.
Because that really could have made that case look a lot differently.
A lot different. Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. The other thing is, I guess I have a hard time understanding why, if Cook was an addict, then I'm sure, I know it's possible to really change, once you get out of addiction. But I have a really hard time understanding sometimes why actual murderers will get out and the conspirators don't, or vice versa. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like we've talked about the Gypsy Rose Blanchard case. And from the beginning, I have felt really bad for the guy who murdered her mother. I mean, he's like autistic. He has like all of these serious mental conditions. He was 100% manipulated by Gypsy Rose, but he has no chance of ever getting out. And she's out living her best life. And
that's true.
And he felt bad. He cried after the murder. He was like crying and felt terrible. And she's like, why are you upset? Like, she didn't care and totally threw him under a bus.
She did. I will say, though, I think he would have ended up killing somebody regardless, because he had, in a lot of his conversations with her, he had a lot of fantasies about killing and raping people that he had killed, that he was telling her about.
But is that just according to her?
I think there were messages on the messaging app that proved like he was saying those things. I don't think it's just according to her.
Because she also said that he raped her afterwards, and they brought that up in court, and I do not believe that mess one bit.
Yeah. I do think she definitely has a problem with the truth. I mean, she was brought up living a lie, so she is out living her best life, and he has no chance of getting out. So you're saying in this case you feel like
I kind of feel the same
thing?
way. I mean, this guy went in and shot this woman 3 times. And I don't give a rip how much I owe my cousin or how much I owe somebody else or how much I need money. Nothing is going to make me feel guilty enough to murder someone. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
And so I just think, I don't know. I mean,
so do you think that he shouldn't have gotten out, or do you think they should let Terry out now too because of it?
I don't know. I mean, the guy's out now. Society says that he's paid his debt.
Well, hopefully he has turned his life around.
Yeah, I hope that. But I guess I just don't understand the system in that regard. Yeah. They did that together. They were co-conspirators in a crime.
Do you think they've served enough time that they should be out, or do you think they should stay in forever?
If it were my daughter, I wouldn't feel like they had served enough time. But I'm not God, and the legal system says that he has served his time. And so all I can do is just hope. I hope for the best. I hope that, I hope he feels really bad about what he did. And I hope that he makes the most of his freedom.
Yeah.
Does something good with it. And I hope the same for Terry, that he, in prison or not, I hope that he makes the most of his life.
Yeah, I will say Melissa's her mother still goes to that same church.
Wow.
And Terry and Melissa do have, those kids are grown now. This case has ripple effects, and it's still impacting them today.
Oh, sure.
I don't know how that release has impacted them, what they think about that.
Yeah.
But I feel like when somebody does come up for parole, definitely the people who are still around, that we should take into account how this is going to impact them, knowing that this person's out or whatever.
And the family, just with them being related, with them being cousins, I can imagine that has rocked that family.
Yeah, because there were lines drawn. People fully believe that he's innocent. People fully believe that he's guilty. There was one one article I read that said Chris's mother and Terry's father, like they don't speak anymore. They have no relationship.
It's so sad. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Do we know who raised the children? I hope that maybe her family got to.
I feel like it might have been her parents since they lived next door
Yeah.
already and spent so much time with those parents.
I hope so.
So I don't know who raised them, but that would be my guess.
Okay. Wow. Those sure were some hard times.
Yes, they were.
Now we're talking about all the notable claims to Randolph County. I feel like we should have mentioned that in the early 90s, Randolph County had more gravel roads than any other county in the state. And growing up in Asheboro, I remember getting my first tattoo at the end of one of them gravel roads. It was right after my 13th birthday. And I think if we would have had hard times and true crimes back then, maybe I would have spent a little more time at home listening. Who knows, I could have grown up to be a rich and famous doctor or lawyer or serial killer. So you make sure you tell everybody you know, and a few people you don't, to check us out. Till next time, goodbye.